Welcome to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast. I'm your host, Troy Hammond, and on today's episode, we're chatting with my good friend and previous boss, Vaughan Fergusson. Vaughan is the founder of Vend, an all-around amazing human being who does impossible things. And it was almost impossible getting him on this podcast, but I'm really thankful we've got him, so enjoy.
Kia ora. Thanks for tuning in to the We Fucking Love Startups podcast, brought to you by Talent Army.
Like, the big thing for me is the reason why we started the podcast was fundamentally I interview people all the time, I chat to people and they're like, I couldn't do a startup, I couldn't work in a startup, I'm not that interesting, or I'm not that cool, or I'm not this. And I'm like, man, everyone works in startups. Like, every people from all walks of life, anyone can do it, you've just got to make that choice. And so I wanted to create the podcast to be able to just tell people stories, and naturally by letting people tell their stories, other people hear it and they go, I could fucking do that. Or, like, that's cool. And so, that's basically what the premise is, man.
Yeah, a lot of people think you're preordained, or, you've got to have the right stuff. And it's like, not in my experience. Most people I know who are involved in, or, running a startup is kind of a moron, and just sort of making it up as they go along.
100%. I was unemployable, right? So I was like, for me to start a company, I was like, well, no one else is going to employ me. I think after Vend, Xero offered me a role for a contract role, and I was like, I don't want to go and work at Xero. And then I was like, they threw some big money at me. And then I met some real senior managers, and they were like, you're the sweary guy, you're not allowed to swear while you're here. You have to follow the script of what Xero is. And I was like, I can't do this. It's time to go. But cheers, man. Anyway, this is good to be on this side of the table from you after, I had probably a month of agonising over a job interview at Vend and thinking about you guys on the other side of the table. So it's nice to be on this side of the table. Feeling good.
Yeah. It's nice being here.
Yeah, and how are you enjoying the whiskey?
Yeah, I don't have a very great experience with whiskey, as in
bad experiences.
Most whiskey makes me involuntarily screw my face up. Yeah, it's just like the bridge of my nose goes really tight, and it's like, but this is good.
Oh, good. Yeah, Japanese whiskey, this one.
Yeah, I find all the Japanese ones are the ones I can drink.
Yeah, I'm a new whiskey drinker myself. I've always been gin and beer, but I've been trying to look after myself health-wise, and so I don't drink beer anymore because it just bloats and makes me feel shit. Yeah. And so I went to gin, and then gin's like the gateway drug to whiskey, I think. Yeah. And so, I've been enjoying whiskey, but the good thing about these is like you drink one or two of them, and then that's enough. Yeah.
You just sip away.
Yeah, man. Hey, so it's weird. It feels like 5 minutes ago that you and I were working together at Vend, and a lot the fuck has happened since then. Are you struggling now to fill your days being retired, or are you?
Well, yes and no. My days seem to be packed, and I'm not quite sure what the hell I'm doing because I'm supposed to be retired. I'm supposed to be playing golf or something. But
can you play golf?
Not really. Yeah, no, I probably could if I actually really wanted to, but I don't really.
Because you're a reformed sports guy, right? Like, you were the ultimate rugby head sports guy that was watching too much rugby and decided that you would quit that, and then reformed off all sports from what I heard.
Yeah, and then sort of brought back in the personal pursuits of like running and cycling and things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So how did that all happen? Do you think, I'm interested to hear about your childhood, because I think my guess would be that this impossible, do the impossible thing probably came from your mum, right? Like that. Like, is that the case? Is that fair to say? Or
I think so. I think I've figured that much out. I think it's just a innate naivety. It's like, well, give it a go.
And was that early on? Like, did you see? Because for those that don't know, your mum was single mum raising three boys in a wheelchair. Not very rich. You guys grew up quite modest. And, it would have been a tough time for her. Like, as a guy, as a single dad, for me, earning decent money, it's tough, let alone throw everything else on the top.
But, and I guess on reflection, I've sort of felt a little bit stink about the time, because for us, but we didn't think of it as being anything unusual. And
well, that's just what you know, right?
Yeah. We grew up with what we knew and in a hyper-supportive environment. Like, mum was always really supportive of anything we wanted to do. Most positive person you could ever meet. Yeah. And so we just grew up thinking that's what people were supposed to be. Yeah. It's like, you don't say no to anything, you just sort of give it a go. and try and help people out and set big ideas and go after them.
Do you remember your mum? Was she an inspiration to you before you became old enough to be wise enough to reflect on life? Did you, and I guess when you were growing up as a young guy, did you look at her and think, wow? Or was it a few years later?
No, she was just mum.
Yeah.
Like, had obviously ultimate respect for her and, was my number one person in the world.
Yeah.
But no, at the time, all the way up into my early 20s, she was just mum. And that's what I thought, everybody's mum was like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you always know that you were going to be in tech? Because your mum bought you a Sega 3000, right? Like, I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah. So, I would have been about 10 years old, and she brought home a Sega SC 3000.
Yeah.
And we'd been playing around with computers at friends' places. So back in those days, it was like ZX Spectrums and those sorts of things. So the little consoles you'd plug into your TV, and you would kind of like code them from magazines. You'd type in the code, and maybe you'd make a tank game.
Yeah.
Take you all weekend to punch in the code, and then you'd play the tank game for 10 minutes and then move on to something else. But like just having that computer in the house, it was like, well, what else could you make this thing do? This is like, for us as kids, this was like this thing's like magical. Like you can tell it what to do. You can instruct it. You can program it and make it. Like back in those days, it was like, print hello, and things like that. But then over the years, the Sega got replaced with Commodore 64, and that got replaced with a PC, and then we had two PCs, and we were like networking them together.
Network game.
I remember geeking out with my best friend, and at the time we were like, imagine if you like had a game that you could play on both computers, and you could compete against each other or play with each other over the net.
Yeah.
And this was all pre-internet.
Yeah.
So like everybody had the same ideas about what the future that could be imagined with computers, and we were just very fortunate that as kids we were riding along. It was like
how much did that Pete? Because like as a single mum on the benefit, that would have cost a fortune for her to
I can't remember how much it was. Like I'd have to work it out with inflation.
But like bank loan sort of stuff.
Yeah, it was bank loan territory. She had to go out and take a loan, and everybody thought she was kind of a bit nuts. So why would you get into debt to buy this toy for the kids? But she had a hunch that it would, computers would be a big part of the future.
Yeah.
And so,
It's a funny story that like so many people have had on the podcast, similar story in that like they're probably a little bit more well-to-do in their childhoods, from the people I've spoken to, that their parents could afford a computer, and so that's what they did, and then they discovered that. But to have that opportunity on with a single mum, like I grew up with a single mum, we couldn't afford that. There's some weeks that I was stealing food, to support our food that night, and so that would have been real tough and amazing.
But again, we didn't really think about it. It was just
what it was.
Just turned up one day. We had computers, and as we got older, we got paper runs and things like that, so we could upgrade the computer and add a sound card to it and a 3DFX video card and all that sort of thing.
And did you know from like that first Sega or Commodore that you were like, this is what I'm going to do now with my life?
Yeah, like my dream was to have a computer software company above a club.
What was the club in your mind?
I don't know, just some sort of, I was probably like 15 at the time, so I had no idea.
That was cool.
It was just cool. It was like, run a bar in the evenings and like write code during the day.
Where was Vend's first ever office?
It was in Kiri.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So then you go to university, did comp sci or anything, or did you?
Tried to. So again, it was just like timing, and this is kind of the key piece of advice for people, is being in the right place at the right time. Like as I went through school, I was lucky that the schools I went to had a computer lab, and that was kind of like what it was. It was a room that had maybe 6 computers in it, and you all took turns at like doing exercises on the computer. But because I had one at home, I kind of knew what you could do extra with computers. So got extra access to the lab to kind of play around with the computers. And then I think I was in the first, as I went through 6th form, I think it was the first year they did the business computing degree at AUT.
Yeah.
And so I went along and did the entry exam for that.
Yeah.
And got 100%, actually got 99%.
100 sounds better. Let's keep it at that.
Yeah.
Edit that out, Jono. Yeah.
And that was the first time I'd got 99% in anything.
Yeah.
And the lecturer who was there doing the exam, he was like, yeah, you'd be welcome to come along next year. And I'm like, all right. So I did that. So, didn't do 7th form, went to AUT.
Yeah.
But then dropped out of that after a year and bought a panel van and drove around the North Island.
Awesome.
just because.
Yeah.
Because,
Why a panel van?
teenagers.
Were you surfing or anything? Or was it just the perception of looking like a surfer? Or?
Again, all by accident. Actually went hitchhiking because me and my mate, we thought, we just hitchhike around everywhere.
Yeah.
The first ride we got was this completely wasted dude who was stoned out of his head and spent more time looking at us than he did at the road. And we were like, okay,
This
maybe.
sounds like a scary movie.
We got as far as Hamilton and then went and hung out with my cousin, and I think we were still there 2 months later, and then we were like, okay, I think we're stuck in Hamilton now. We need to get out of Hamilton. And so we went to a local wrecker and bought an almost written off panel van.
Awesome.
That probably only had about 6 months of life left before the driver's door fell off and and the floor rusted through. And we were like, I shouldn't be saying this, but we took out maxed out our student loans and bought the panel van.
Yeah.
And we just drove around the North Island for like 6 months, just, I don't know, doing nothing, playing music and busking. And
what was Vaughan like at that stage? Were you extroverted, introverted guy? What?
Well, I've begun to realise I'm an ambivert. So
Yeah.
Around people I know, I can be quite extroverted, or I can force myself to be extroverted. But it comes at a high cost of, I need
Having
to
to recharge.
need to go curl up in a ball for a while.
Yeah. I've recently discovered that in the last 5 years that I am in the wrong profession, obviously, for that. But if I have a full-on week of interviewing, I can't even see anyone over the weekend. I just have to go and read books for a weekend and recharge.
Yeah, that's me. And but I was the long-haired alternative guy who, at the time I wanted to get into photography. So I got accepted into Waikato's fine arts. And so I was going to go back to university and go do that. But then, after we were driving around in the panel van for 6 months, I think I went home and Mum probably gave me one of those looks. She was like, are you sure you're doing what you should be doing with your life? And I was like, well, I'm really into photography, but I'd met a lot of photographers and they were like, yeah, well, your career is probably going to become a wedding photographer if you follow that.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I still think computers could be something. So I went back and completed the business computing course. Didn't actually complete it.
Enough to get by.
I did another year and a half, and then I got a job offer, and I was like, there's actually a long sordid story which I won't go into, but I got accused of cheating in one of my. It sounds like I'm getting into it. I got accused of cheating in one of my papers, and because again, like I've always been a C student, just sort of cruise through, but I was like, I'm going to actually. I had an opportunity to merit the year, or whatever they called it at that stage. So you had to so pass with distinction. So you had to get 90% or average. I can't remember what it was. And I was like, well, I could do that if I really
actually try.
I can actually do this. And but I was in the second semester, and my results from the first semester weren't very good. And then the first assignment I did after the break, I did it over the break. I was like, I'm not going to leave this like I usually do to the last minute. I'm going to actually do it properly and then redo it, then redo it, and then redo it. And I was like so proud of what I submitted. And then I remember I was sitting at home on the couch on a Sunday evening, and my lecturer rang me at home and said, well, I've just been marking the assignments, and yours is very good, but it's too good. We think you cheated.
That's a horrible call to get.
Yeah. And I'm like, what? But they're like, well, we can't prove that you cheated, so we're going to give you just enough marks that you won't merit and you won't be able to graduate with distinction.
How is that supposed to inspire a student to do better?
I just felt petty and nasty.
Yeah.
And it was like, I do a lot of stuff with AUT. It was just, I think, a bad lecturer.
Yeah.
So it wasn't the fault of the school, but it didn't really inspire me to want to go back.
Yep.
And then there was a job posting on the notice board for for an engineer to go work at a telecommunications computer telephony company.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, computer telephony, I don't know what that is, but go give it a go. And got the job.
Awesome.
And didn't realize it. And I only just realized it a few years ago. It was like, that job was a startup. It was me and the founder and his wife, and that was it.
Wow.
And like he built the company from like just a couple of desks in an office in Manukau and we grew the team. So at one point, I think there was 10 of us.
And so that was your first, like, chasing the dragon of a startup in terms of that feeling of growing with a company?
Yeah, because I didn't feel like I had a title and was in a role. It was like we just turned up each day and it was like, okay, we've got this stuff that we've got to do. Like, we've got these customers, we've committed to this, we just got to get it done. And we just did whatever we needed to do, weekends, late nights, traveling all around the country.
What do you think it is about, so like people feel that, right, when they're like their employees, and a lot of vendors, right, like we're like this, they just want to do as much as they can to help the company, and they just want to, they'll give up anything because they feel like it's the right thing to do. What do you think it is about like that feeling that you get when you're working in one of these little small startups that you just want to do as much as you can?
I think you just feel valued, and that you can make a difference. Like you don't have to turn up and do the same thing every day. Yeah. And if you want to push yourself and stretch yourself and do a bit of extra, then there's plenty of stuff waiting to be done.
Yeah.
And so you can push yourself as hard as you want to go. And my whole career has always been those sorts of roles where there isn't a job description. It's just like, we've just got to get stuff done. Yeah. And we're all learning as we go. Yeah.
And so then how long were you in that job for?
5 years.
Well, that's a good innings for your first job.
Yeah. And then did my OE with Mel, my girlfriend at the time, who then became my first wife. Yeah. We travelled around Thailand for a couple of months and then went up to the UK and did working in IT in the UK for a couple of years.
It's like a rite of passage for Aussies and Kiwis.
Yeah. And then came home and I was like, I don't want to have a job again. I want to do that thing. I want to get that feeling back. Yeah. And so ever since then, I've run my own businesses. And
what is that feeling? Like, describe that feeling.
That you can kind of craft the future. Like that feeling of having a thing, a business that you're growing, like an entity, a thing that you can nurture and grow, and you can watch it become bigger and grow more successful. Yeah. And you can shape it. Like you can start off thinking you're going to go this way and kind of change the course. I think it's just that making something that you're proud of. And then the double bonus is, working in software is that, 9 times out of 10, you're making a thing that as well. So you're not only making a startup, but you're actually making a product that gets appreciated. Yeah. And I think, again, on reflection, we should have a couch really that we should be on. It's like I always regretted not following the photography path, because that was like following the path of creativity. Yeah. And instead took this, sciences path. And don't you think that product engineering is like left brain, right brain? Like it is. It is. And again, perfect timing because, software was at the time just about to go through this massive era of, well, basically the internetification of the world. Yeah. Like software ate everything. Everybody was building a web-based version or a software version of that. Like in my first job, I didn't even have a PC, didn't even have an email address, and I had a landline, and that was my way, and memo notes, and that was my way of communicating with the rest of the world. I remember we got our first.
I wish we could go back to like that, to be honest.
Sometimes, yeah. I'm kind of trying to emulate that in my retirement. Yeah. I don't have the landline though. And I remember installing our first email server at work, and so we could have an email address.
That's true startup.
Yeah. And now it's like we just can't get away. We can't escape. It's chasing us. Yeah, everywhere.
I've been complaining about that all day today, that I was like, today it was the day that I noticed how many notifications I get on every single thing and the pressure that I feel from getting back to people because I'm a recruiter and all this. And so I was like, I've got to stop this. I've got to figure out a way that I can feel enough to do my job, but like release the pressure of other people getting back to them. And so, yeah, it's tough these days. I wish sometimes I fantasize about just having a little memo thing that I could read some memos and reply to them.
Since we sold Vend and retired, I canned my calendar. I was like, well, I don't want to go back to like living my life by first thing you do is look at your calendar and try to figure out, you know, what you're supposed to be doing when. It's like, if I can't hold it in my head that I need to be, you know, meeting somebody at 3 p.m. on Thursday, then I'm doing too much. Yeah. And so that's what I did. And you're lucky I turned up because...
Yeah, I was just thinking, geez, man, I'm memorable enough. Must have been the invite of whiskey.
Yeah.
And so then you did a few jobs, like, so you own your own companies. You ran a digital agency, like owned a digital agency, and then you moved up north, right?
Yeah, we started a digital agency with another friend of mine who I bumped into in Thailand. Yeah. We're called Blue Day, and we did that for a few years. That was when I came back to New Zealand. And then started another digital agency called Salt Interactive with some other friends who ran Salt Design, and I set up the interactive version of that. Did that for a few years. And then one of our customers had an idea that he wanted to productize, and so that turned out to be quite a big chunk of the work that we did. And at one point, I said to him, I was like, "Wow, you can keep throwing lots of money at us and we'll keep building it, but you probably need to spin it up and make it, hire a team and make it your own thing." And then convinced him of that, and then he convinced me to join him and be CTO and hire the engineering team. And
this is
Vinet.
Vinet, that's right.
Yeah, and we raised a bit of money, and we set up the office in Kerikeri.
Yeah.
And
why Kerikeri? Because is that Mel's family?
Mel had roots up there, and we just wanted to get out of Auckland for a bit. We just had our first daughter. Yeah. And so we thought it'd be kind of neat, and we also thought it would be it would help from an employment angle, be a little bit different. It's like you can work in IT and live in.
It's funny you say that, because my brain was just going to the opposite. I think that back then that would have been really hard to hire people.
It was. Yeah. And obviously now with COVID, everybody kind of got the idea of like, hey, I could do this from anywhere. Yeah. And we were like, yeah, you could do it from Kerikeri. The hardest thing was trying to convince people that there was actually life. Like, what would you do in your free time? It wasn't like we all stand around the piano singing songs.
You don't? That sounds ideal.
It does kind of. Yeah. And we did that for 5 years, and then. I heard a story that you went for a drive with Mel up north, and then driving back, that was when you had this crazy idea that you would ride a bike the whole length of New Zealand. And when I say the whole length of New Zealand, like even islands, including even Stewart Island, which most people forget. Well, so there's an important bit that happened before then, which was Vinet crashed and burned. Yeah. And then we trade sailed it to Trade Me.
And that became Travel Bug,
which I don't even know if it's still a thing, but it was like the travel arm of Trade Me.
So when you say crashed and burned, why did it crash and burn?
It just ran out of funding. It was like
because it was quite successful, wasn't it? From memory?
Yeah. It was slightly too early. So this was, I think, in about year 4. The first thing it was a interactive map platform, so you could find things to do around the world in New Zealand. And it was this cool map, and you could zoom in, and as you zoomed in, the map rendered. You can go down to streets and And then after about a year working on that, Google came out with Google Maps, and we were like, well, we're fucked. And so we'd also been working on this booking engine so that you could book, accommodation. But we thought, well, instead of just like hotels and motels, wouldn't it be cool if like you could book anything, a caravan or somebody's spare room or,
So Airbnb before Airbnb. Yeah. Wow. Have you listened to the podcast on how we built this? The guy that tells the Airbnb story?
No.
You should listen to it. Because instantly, imagine even at your stage then trying to pitch that product to VCs. We'd like to raise money to be able to book this house, and it's just air.
Yeah, and we tried and they didn't get it. And we had to build, the idea was great, but we had to build this banking engine because in order to make it work, you had to be safe. So if I was booking your caravan and I turned up and the caravan wasn't there or somebody else was in it or whatever, I got my money back instantly.
Yeah.
So there was that, we had to build in that trust engine.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that made it unique. And we had investors from overseas all lined up, and then the GFC hit. And everybody was like, "Right, we're sticking our money under the mattress. So, sorry."
Fuck.
And we were screwed.
So this is 09?
Yeah. And
you're up north, where there's probably...
Well, we had actually opened an Auckland office then because we had grown. We were like 30 people, so we were hiring engineers. We needed engineers, so we opened a Takapuna office. And I remember sitting in the Takapuna office, and somebody walked in and said, "Hey, have you seen this thing? It's called Air Bed and Breakfast by a couple of guys in San Francisco. It looks like they're doing the same thing." I was like, whatever.
We were first.
We're 4 years ahead of them.
Yeah.
Good luck to them. Yeah, but we ran out of money, and they didn't. So.
Wow, imagine if that had kept going.
Well, that assumes a lot of things. We would have still had to have executed really well. We could have crashed and burned at any point along the journey. I'm not for a second saying that we could have been Airbnb.
Well,
we had a similar idea
Yeah.
a little bit earlier, and we ran out of money.
What was the name of the product?
That was actually quite controversial because it had a few names. It was called Lemon Squeezy for a bit. Because it made booking so easy peasy lemon squeezy.
Nice.
I can't remember. It had a name like book something. I can't remember actually.
Yeah, I like lemon squeezy. Let's go with that. Yeah. So then the GFC is upon us. Your business has gone sideways. What are you thinking?
Thinking I just need to take some time out and just sort of figure out what I was going to do. It was, being in a startup was super high stress, burnout.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of startups at the moment who are having to lay people off. We're seeing founders who have been over the last few years put on this pedestal of you're the greatest, and you're the, like, especially in Wellington, right? Wellington's a small community, and there's a lot of startup founders that I feel really sorry for at the moment, put up on this huge pedestal, PR, and then all of a sudden they're having to lay people off to continue their business. And the pain that they're feeling at the moment, like I know a lot of them, one of them was going to come on the podcast, but can't because of the guilt that this person's feeling. Do you think it was easier back then, before the social hype, to have a business that sort of faded away, or
No.
was it the same feeling?
Same feeling, because especially when you're the one who's made the promise to the team about the vision and the future, and like you've kind of promised them that it's going to be a thing, and then one day you have to turn around and say, well, I lied, or I got it wrong, and it sucks for you because we're going to have to cut some roles. People have said to me, it's like, you just get a thick skin and that stuff gets easier. It's like, nah, because like everybody I hire, like I personally connect with and want to make sure that they are as committed to this thing as I am, and I've kind of made a promise to them, and like I've reneged on that promise.
I think it definitely you become a bit more professional at having the conversation, but you
can have the meetings and know what to say and not to say,
but if you don't feel like an arsehole, then there's something wrong with you, I think. And so that's the time then that you would go for a drive. Then we're back in that situation. You go for a drive up north.
Yeah, we took the girls up to the lighthouse up the top.
Yeah.
And then we were driving back, and I was like, I've never been right to the bottom of New Zealand, and I'd put on a ton of weight, and I was like, well, why don't I just grab a bike and go to the bottom of New Zealand?
So to ride from the bottom of the New Zealand to the top of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Overweight. And when was the last time you rode a bike before that?
Don't know. 20, when I was 20. Last time I had to ride a bike before I bought a car.
Yeah. So quite a while since. So you're not a road bike rider then?
No. I went to the local bike shop, and I told the guy, I was like, give me I want a decent bike. He's like, well, what are you going to do? I was like, I'm going to ride the length of New Zealand. He was like, okay, what are you doing? I'm like, seriously, I'm going to take it down to Invercargill and then go even further south and then come back. And he was like, okay, well, I better upgrade your brakes then, and you better have these tires because these ones will probably get you at least halfway. And then just dragged the bike around Kirikiri for a few months and just rode up hills and vomited into bushes, and just kept doing that until the vomiting stopped and I could make it up to the top of the hill. And I was like, right, I'm ready. I'm off.
Wow.
And like the easy thing, well, actually not the easy thing, but because like ride Cape Reinga to Bluff is the thing that people do.
Yeah.
But because I lived in Kirikiri, I was like, well, if I started in Cape Reinga, it's like Kirikiri would be like day 3, and like there's a high probability I would just like want to quit.
Yeah.
At that point.
So start at the bottom.
So I was like, I'm gonna have to go from the bottom. So so home is towards the end.
So why not Bluff? Why not start in Bluff?
Because it's not the bottom of New Zealand. So I was like, and then I looked at the map. I was like, well, wait a second. There's Stewart Island. There's some roads on Stewart Island.
How big's Stewart Island?
I don't know, but there's only like a couple of kilometres of actual road.
So you took the ferry over, rode for
like half an hour.
Came back.
And then jumped on the ferry, and then went from Bluff to Invercargill on the first night. Yeah.
How was the first night? Because I imagine that like adrenaline gets you so far, and then like when that first night you're on your own, I imagine that's fun, but the next day I imagine would be tough.
Yeah, the first day was, it was buzzing. I'd met another guy who was cycling around the South Island and tried to talk him into like coming with me for the whole way. But his idea of cycling around New Zealand was like cycling 20 kilometres and then finding a bar.
That sounds like my idea of cycling
Which
New Zealand.
Does sound like a lot more fun. Yeah, it was like day 3, and that's when the muscles were starting to hurt, and you began to appreciate exactly how hilly New Zealand is.
Yeah.
And that's when I was right. I knew it. I was right. I was like, day 3, I'm probably going to want to quit. And I did. I was like so ready to throw the bike into the ditch and just like, screw this. This is nuts.
Yeah.
It was getting dark, and I hadn't quite managed to get into wherever I was going, Balclutha, I think.
Yeah.
And I was like, what am I doing? What am I doing?
Were you, because you're overweight, were you unfit? Or were you fit enough then?
I think I was fit enough I could actually cycle a day.
Yeah.
I'd still be pretty worn at the end of the day. But the thing I didn't really take into account is like doing it every day, and getting up the next day and then having to do the same thing again and again and again.
Because how are your legs after day 3? Are they? I've never ridden a bike for that long.
They're pretty noodly.
Yeah. And is it just a mental toughness that you have to push through, or is it physical? Absolutely fucked, mental and physical.
Well, it was either I now live in Balclutha, or I need to get back on the bike and keep going. And also, I was raising money for my mum's charity.
Yeah.
She worked for this vinyl agency in Otara, and I couldn't quit on that. I was like, well, I'm raising money, so I've got to keep going. And I knew that. That's why, and I shared it online. Twitter had just become a thing.
Yeah.
And so I was like tweeting it as I went, and I was videoing it on YouTube. I was like, well, I'm going to get everybody else to hold me to account on this, because if I quit, I'm going to look like a dick. Yeah. So I'll get as many people looking at me as possible. So
social pressure kicks in.
Get the social pressure.
So this bike ride, how long did it take? 40 days?
It would have been about that. I can't remember now, but yeah.
So I've heard so many stories, folklore of, I met Vaughan on his bike ride, and he pitched Vend to me, and we actually did the first initial product session and trying to figure out what he wanted, and he came into my retail store, or some tech person had this conversation in a bar with you, and so are any of these true?
Yeah. I had because before the bike ride, the other reason for doing the bike ride, I'd been working on what was the prototype for Vend at the time, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I could do this, but I was still pretty burnt from doing the Vinet thing, and I was like, do I have another 5 years plus that I want to put into this right now? Do I have it in the tank? And so I thought, well, I'll do the bike ride, and if I get to the other end and still think it's a great idea, then I'll do it. And I literally had printouts of like screen mocks in my panniers, and so we got panniers.
So you're doing testing,
bike bags.
Yeah, bike messenger bag type thing.
Yeah. And as I went, I'd emailed a few people from TradeMe and other people, basically anybody who I knew within the tech scene. I was like, coming through. If you want to join me on the bike, then I'd love your company. Or if you've got a spare bed, I'd love that too. Yep. And I didn't tell them about the Vend thing.
The incoming pitch.
And then I'd be like, so hey, have a look at this.
This is something I prepared earlier.
This is the idea I'm working on. It's like point of sale, but it's on the cloud. It's in a browser, and so that's how I got Sam and Rowan from TradeMe on board.
Yeah,
and Lance Wiggs.
Yeah.
He came on board eventually.
Yeah. I was speaking to Cos a bit that he'd chatted with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cos and a few others. And Ben Keeps. And
it's a memorable pitch. I mean, there's like people should be learning from this, right? You're just turning up in your t-shirt, your branded t-shirt to a VC, ride your bike.
Exactly.
Stand out from the crowd.
Trap them on a bike for like 3 hours, and then they've got nowhere else to go. Well, they could ride away from you, but that would, that'd be pretty dick.
Sorry, that's a no from me. And then yeah.
And then got to the end, and I was like, I think I can do this.
So that feeling, talk me through that feeling when you get to the lighthouse. Like, that would have been pretty special.
That was like, it was so good.
Were people there waiting for you? Or?
Mel and the kids were.
Yeah.
And I had to have 2 takes of riding up to the lighthouse because the first time they weren't ready and they weren't looking. Didn't have the welcome signs up, and I'm like, all right, I'll just go back down there a bit and I'll come back because I'm filming this. No. And so I had a little welcome party.
Awesome.
And then just looked out across the ocean, and I was like,
for your kids to see that, like we were talking about this before the podcast started, like how we hope that our kids, learn lessons from us. Like, that's pretty remarkable. Like for that, like that makes me proud for you as a father, for them to see you achieve something like that, an overweight guy. Because I imagine you would have lost a bit of weight.
Yeah, I lost about 30 kgs on the whole thing.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's special, man. Well done.
Thanks. Yeah.
And do you think that sort of is that what spurred you to do these crazy things every year? Like actually Matt Searle on Instagram on that little ask me anything or ask Vaughan anything thing said, is he still doing his impossible challenges? I really need to know. And so did that spur you to keep doing them? Was that the moment? Or?
Yeah, I think I'd actually started doing those a few years before, but this was like the first big one. I was like, okay, I'm going to see if I can ride the length of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And since then they sort of ebbed and flowed in scale of magnitude of craziness around the challenge.
What are the memorable ones?
The running, just getting into running. Like, I pitched it, I said it, not that I was pitching it to anybody, but it was like run 1 million meters, which is 1,000 kilometers.
Yeah.
Which sounds really cool.
Yeah, 1 million meters sounds much better.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, it's a long way. And then I tell people, I was like, no, I ran 1,000 kilometers, and they're like, whoa, non-stop. I'm like, no, over a year.
Yeah. Because what's that, 3Ks a day?
That's 3Ks a day. Which
Did you do 3Ks a day, or did you save it up?
No, I pretty much got into the habit of doing 3Ks a day because I very quickly figured out the hard way that if you skip a couple of days, then you've got to go for a 9K run, and that's a lot harder than doing a 3K run.
It's an easy break point.
Yeah.
Right there.
And then if you miss a week, then you got to run a half marathon to catch up, and so I had to factor in. It's like, what if I got sick and I just couldn't run for a bit?
Yeah.
But no, I pretty much forced myself to go and do 3Ks a day.
Is it true that I've flirted with being a runner my whole life? Like, I'll have a 2-year span where I'll do a bunch of half marathons, and then I'll realise I hate running and stop running. And now I only run when they call last drinks at the pub. But did you have that runner's high feeling that you felt like, I'm a runner now, I really enjoy this?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of the best times of my life was when I was running. I've tried to get back so many times, but I think I just need to set another challenge Otherwise, if I don't have the challenge, if I don't have the goal that I'm aiming for, I just don't do it.
I think the challenge that you had when I was at Vend, I remember, was singing something.
Yeah, had to get a paid gig in front of 100 people.
Had you sung before?
No.
Were you a good singer?
I wasn't a good singer when I did the gig either. But again, I made it another charity fundraiser and got 100 suckers to turn up and put up with me wailing on stage.
Were you more nervous doing that than the other ones?
By far. That was actually the hardest because even though I kind of gave myself a good year sort of run up to it and did singing lessons and a few other things and just tried to prepare myself as much as possible, nothing could prepare you for like standing on stage in front of 100 people and then having to perform for them and I realized, and so what I did was as a fundraiser, people could pick songs, so they could pledge money and then they could pick the songs.
Oh, that's even worse though.
Yeah, so I had no control over the set list, and in fact I didn't even know the set list until 48 hours before.
And so you had to learn the words.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So in the end, had to do it sort of karaoke style. So I had like a screen with the words. Otherwise, there's no way I could learn.
What was the hardest song?
Oh, I can't remember now. It was a Sam Smith song.
Oh yeah.
I had to like deliver that one in the style of spoken word. There's no way I was going to do that. But yeah, that was the hardest. Yeah.
Shit, man. Well, you're definitely no stranger to doing impossible things, and so then Vend was something that you'd sort of set yourself a challenge of, like, right, what's GFC?
That was the next one. Start a startup. So at the time, it was start a $100 million startup in the middle of the GFC.
Yeah, that sounds impossible.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I gave myself a bit longer time period to do that. But the starting was the key thing. And
so how do you, so this is a good point, right? So finance like failed, unfortunately, right? How do you then, as a startup founder, get back up and go again, and then say to people, "Hey, come on, let's do this again"? Like, what do you for the people out there that have tried and they've had an attempt that didn't work out? What would you tell them? Like, what's the messaging that you can say to people authentically? Like, yeah, we can do this again, or
I don't know. It's just like, if it's what you want to do, then do it. And people, if it's really what you want to do, people will see that. And
so just be authentically yourself.
Like through every failure, there's a whole bunch of lessons and things that you just won't do again. And so every failure you make, it's actually making you stronger and more prepared for what could come next.
100% agree. Like I keep trying to say, let's lose the word failure and just say attempt, right? Because they're all just attempts that get you to that one opportunity that it's going to be, success. And so,
but it doesn't take away the, sort of the tall poppy sort of haha, told you so, told you'd fail, and all of that psychological stuff and the burnout and the just feeling, like you failed, like you still feel like a failure.
Why do you think tall poppy is so prevalent in New Zealand? As an Aussie, I grew up in Australia. There is a definite innate championing other people a lot more than here in New Zealand. When I first got here, I was like really dumbfounded with the, like people were like, dumb it down, Troy. Like dumb it down, man. I'm like, well, why? I want to be good and I want to help people and do this. And they're like, no, you can't seem cocky. And I'm like, well, I didn't think I was cocky. And then I sort of started getting my head around, there is tall poppy here. What do you think?
I don't know. I think if we could figure it out and solve it, we would have figured it out and solved it by now. I think it's just part of our knitting. There's a certain meanness in us. Like maybe it's the yin and the yang, because like as Kiwis, we're generally quite positive and smiley people. And maybe behind closed doors we can,
pull the mask off and
have the opportunity to put the boot in. I don't know. I've seen people who I thought were reasonable people become just real assholes. And I'm like, why are you being so mean? Like they're just giving it a go. It's like, sure, the idea is not great, but history has proven a lot of really dumb ideas to be really, really successful. So who it's like they're the one who's taking the risk. It's pretty easy just to stand around and take pot shots at people who, giving it a go.
And a lot of people do it. Like I'm in a lot of group chats where someone will put snide comment about, someone that's having a crack and trying to start a company. And I'm like, so I'm just trying to stop it in any way possible now. And I'm just like, awesome. Like this is great. This is awesome. Watch him go. Let's be positive for him. And everyone, oh yeah, of course, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, so I'm personally now just trying to be a better person in any opportunity. Anytime I see someone on LinkedIn create a business, I think, we should be doing like baby showers and things, like entrepreneurial showers and, what do you need? What support do you need? Or how can I help you? Congratulations, good luck. And so, I'm trying to be a better force, and I'm starting to see it's like other people are doing this as well, which is giving me some sort of hope that it's changing.
That's what we need. It's because the pathway into entrepreneurialism, or whatever you want to call it, whatever label, it's like there is no handbook, there's no university course, you just sort of have to go and fumble your way through it and figure out your path. And everybody's path could be different. It could be a 20-year journey for you to kind of get into doing your first thing. You know, for you, it might be go hang out and work at another startup and kind of see how the magic is made. And then maybe you learn 5 things. And then you go try something and you fail at it and you learn another 5 things. And then, you're sort of building up your kitty of startup know-how for when you're ready for your thing. You're like, well, I think I know how to do that bit and that bit and that bit. I think I can give it a go now, and take that leap.
Did you feel like that when you started Vend?
I felt like I had no idea what I was doing. I felt like I was an average engineer and I could like hack together some stuff and do some mocks that looked half decent.
Yeah.
Had no idea about scaling a business or like running the finances or doing the sales marketing and stuff. But I just sort of came at it from an honest approach, which is like, well, I don't know what I don't know. And from the marketing point of view, it's like, well, just tell the story how I will tell the story at a barbecue.
Yeah.
And that kind of became the brand for Vend, which was like very
authentic.
Yeah.
And that's so. I remember the moment that I saw a video and said, I want to work at Vend, and I took a $140,000 pay cut to go and work at Vend just because I was so passionate about coming to work there. Like Kirsty got in touch and I was like, fuck yeah, I'm in. And it was the Wear What You Want video that Nick Holdsworth and the team, just because it just felt authentically fun, and that was me. I found that I was always wearing a mask at work and I couldn't be myself, and I just saw this company that was just honest, and they were like blowing up cash registers and doing fucking cool shit, and I was like, they're breaking the norms of what like a traditional tech company, you know, that's trying to be all American and trying to be all polished, and it just felt authentic and fun. Was that created or was that just like it was?
That just happened. That was just like who we were. And that's something else that naivety is like, because I'd never really had a real job, I just turned up how, it's like, this is me. This is the dumb jokes I make, and this is what I wear. I'm not like trying to be, and like I noticed people who like would have, because I'd know them sort of personally and professionally, I'm like, you're two different people. What's up with that? Yeah. It's like, you should just be you. Yeah. And so that became our thing. It's like, we just want to hire you for you. And those videos are like, at least one Friday a month, Nick and I would just sit down and go, okay, well, what video should we do this month? And we'd come up with a crazy idea, and then we'd just go and do it. And we went and hired a whole bunch of costumes, and we did that one, and then we did a skydiving one.
Yeah, I remember that one, driving around Australia from seeing customers. Yeah.
And then we actually did a relatively high budget one where we hired a proper crew, and we did the snuff film where we about the cash register who just needed to be taken out the back and shot. And had some serious voice actors, and actually the director who filmed that one, Gerard, had just released his first feature film, Megan.
Oh wow, yeah, I've seen that all over social media.
Yeah. And it just became, it just sort of like, people say to me, it's like, well, your customers aren't going to see these. Like, what if you're a customer in America? They don't care about these videos. Will probably put them off. And I'm like, we're not doing it for the customers. We're doing it for like employment brand. Yeah. Like, we want to build, a buzz around what we're doing, so people want to come and work for us.
Yeah, I get that. I'm not sure if you ever saw the video that we released at Talent Army back in the day, but it was pretty out there. The premise was that I was working with a video production company, and I said, I want to build a video for Talent Army, but I want it to be out there. And they went, we got this video, that we've got this like story that we've been really wanting to do, but no one's been brave enough to do it. And I was like, yeah, I'm that guy. And they went, okay, so it's about a guy who, whenever he ejaculates, he time travels.
I have seen this, yeah.
And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, but and then you become the recruitment company that helps him puts his powers to good. And I was like, it seems, it could be quite sexist. And they were like, no, it's going to be like empowering. All the women will be the empowering figures and the likes. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And I was like, the most scared I've ever been in my life. And it got 2 weeks of huge traction. And then it started getting some complaints, and I was just like, just kill it, let's take it. But yeah, it was a really well production shot video. But it probably shouldn't have been a recruitment video.
Yeah. Like, even though I say it wasn't for the customers, we did get heaps of customers who, who just liked our brand of humor, and they became some of our most sort of staunch, longest customers. Yeah. And actually, the CEO of PayPal at the time saw one of our videos, and he showed it to the company all hands at PayPal.
Really?
He was like,
what was the video?
It was the skydiving one.
Yeah,
because we were paying by PayPal as we jumped out of the airplane. He was like, showed it to the all hands at PayPal, and he was like, we should be doing like this.
That's awesome.
He was probably joking, but we could get away with it because we were just a bunch of
crazy Kiwis on the other side of the world. When you reflect back now about Vend and its early days, what was special? Like, what were the things that you think that was the reason why it took off?
The people. Like, like I hesitate to put a number on it, but it was kind of like, and always feel bad when I think about this because it was kind of like the first 30, 40
The core
people
crew, yeah.
who took a huge, massive leap.
Yeah.
Probably the first 100,
Yeah.
whatever the number is. And like, you know, we didn't pay very well.
Yeah.
But you know, they just really believed in what we were doing. And most of the job descriptions were pretty vague. And it was kind of like, it would change week by week as to what we needed to do. But, you know, it was like people would just like essentially have a completely different job in a month's time from what they were doing a month ago, just because it's what needed to do. And it was like, does anybody know how to do Facebook marketing? Nope. You go figure it out. You can't? Okay, right. You go figure out how we're going to do the Facebook marketing. And it was just kind of like that. That's
back to your early telephony startup days.
Yeah, it just felt like this is what a startup is a bunch of people who are really passionate about the idea who will just do anything to make it happen. And they're not there turning up for a paycheck. They're turning up because they really want to make a difference. And they want to learn a lot of really cool stuff and hang out with people who are like them.
Those 40 people, I think I know a lot of them, they're all in very successful careers now. Like all of them have done extremely well just because the amount of exposure that they would have got to working on lots of things at an early startup that scaled, you know, that has done them phenomenally well. And so, and a lot of them got some pretty good money when the company sold as well, no doubt. So,
I'm hoping so. Yeah.
And so the people were the special sauce. When did it change for you that you became Vaughan the CEO and not Vaughan the guy that was working in the team? Like, do you remember when that changed?
Yeah, I was never really comfortable being the CEO. Because why? Because, you know, you felt like you needed to have the answer for everything all the time. Yeah. And I'm an optimist, and so for me, you know, that whiskey glass is half full. Yeah. Actually, it's only quarter full now. So, you'd feel like you're lying, because like it felt like, well, my approach was always one of positivity. It was like, you know, if you didn't seem like you were that jazzed or knew where we were going, then how would everybody else believe that we're heading in the right direction? Yeah. And that just gets hard because it's not always going so great. And sometimes you've got to stand up and just tell people, it's like, no, things are actually going pretty tough at the moment. So
you were very transparent. I remember when I started at Vend, there was a open door meeting policy. So I think I remember reading something like, if you find that any meeting that's in someone's diary interesting, you can go in and join it and learn. And I remember thinking, that's pretty full on.
Yeah, and we shared all the company numbers. We had dashboards. You know, we had a number of months until we would run out of cash on a big dashboard on the wall. So we could all see it every day. And, you know, I'd stand up in front of the team every month sort of going through, this is how we make money. It's like we sell a product for X number of dollars a month, and then and if we churn customers, then, you know, and took them basically through the funnel, which is like, you know, marketing spend to get people to be aware of us, and then we convert them into accounts, and then we keep them for as long as possible. And the best way to keep them is to have a fucking amazing product, and then they're never going to want to leave. And that was our business model, and had to kind of like remind everybody every month. Because we would hire another 20 people, and it's like, right, you need to know how the business runs. And so everybody kind of understood the mechanics. And so then, you know, if we weren't topping up the top of the funnel, it was kind of like very obvious. It was like, well, we're really struggling with that part of the funnel, so we need to fix it. Yeah. And so I like to think, you know, the transparency helped, but also as we went, the business just became more complex. And
you can't keep that level of transparency forever.
No, and it's actually a weight on people because, you know, if you look at the dashboard and it's like, oh, that number's red, it's like, shit, are we fucked? Yeah. It's like, no, it just means we need to try something different or, you know, tweak a few things. And
so if you go back and do it again, would you do the same level of transparency?
Not to the same degree. I think transparency is important so that people understand that, you know, we're in a good place. Yeah. And having that level of like, actually, we're not in a good place, so we all need to pull together and do something a little bit different in order to get us back into a good place. I think that is key. I just wouldn't be as open. Honestly, I wouldn't be as open because I think it is too much weight for people at some point. Yeah. You kind of want people to feel safe that, you know, they can turn up and just focus on their thing without having to worry about when the company's going to run out of cash.
fast forward a couple of years, Vend's taking off now, right? You and everyone feels like, oh my God, we're now a successful SaaS business in New Zealand. How do you then go about releasing to exec team and bringing in the right people? Like, what's the thought process of bringing in talent to the business then? And when you've got like 40 people who've been working their ass off, right? And then you have to bring in some other people above them. Like, talk me through that.
Well, sometimes you just need to find the person who's like 10 pages further in the how-to manual on that thing than everybody else. But, you know, at the same time, we've had a lot of those early vendors grew all the way through the organization as well. So it's the best of both worlds. So you can grow as much as you want to grow. But then sometimes, you'd need to bring somebody in. It's like, well, none of us have actually managed to grow enough into this role, or into these roles. So we need to go out and find somebody externally to come in and who can teach us. And then you sort of frame it that way. It's like, well, it's not that you're being passed up for, a promotion for you to go and to be that person because you don't have the skills. But if we bring somebody in who's got the skills, you can learn from somebody else who has done that before.
Who were you learning from at that stage?
As many people as I could get advice from. So from Sam and Rowan as early investors, and then Mickey and Claudia on the board, and just other people in the startup ecosystem. The hard stuff nobody talks about, and so it was really hard to kind of get the answers of like, well, how do you deal with like having to let go of 20% of the company? How do you deal with, needing to go raise money and you're not really sure if you're going to be able to find investors to who can come on board? Sort of all the stuff that is kind of not the glamorous stuff, it's the hard stuff. Yeah.
How do you, like, for example, what advice would you give to someone who, so there's a lot of early stage startups now who are in a pretty dire time. It's a weird year in terms of recession wise or in the economy. They probably thought they were going to be able to raise some money pretty easily, in July this year. Now it turns out they're not going to be. What advice would you give them if you were in this market right now, 10, 20 people, and you were like, holy shit, we need to raise money? What would you say that they should do?
Well, it's not that they can't raise money, but they should just evaluate whether or not the probability of that is going to be high. And if it's not, then they need to flip into survival mode of like, well, assume that we can't get the money that we're going to get because that's going to be a high probability. How are we going to keep this thing going? And you just have to do whatever you can, like get people to take salary cuts. If you don't want to lose your team, then getting people to take salary cuts or see if you can put equity on the table for people. Like these blips are never forever. Like as long as you can go another day, metaphorically, sometimes it is literally another day, but as long as you can find a way to keep going, then you'll keep the thing alive. As soon as you make the decision that it's over, then it's over. It's like...
Yeah, so Vend started in the GFC, right? And then I'm sure there was moments where you were awake at night, years into that, thinking, holy fuck, how am I going to keep going with this company? Where are we going to get money from? What are we going to do? Like, what do you do in those situations? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, we idolise founders that have done well and we hear the really good stories, but we don't necessarily often hear the stories of like staying awake at night thinking, how the fuck am I going to pay everyone this next month, And so like, what do you do in those situations yourself?
Bottle it up, push it right down.
Save it to retirement.
I don't know. It's like, I've sort of blanked it all out. One thing I learnt.
I'm sure there was moments like that, right? I'm sure there was tough.
So many. And one thing I learnt, and this is not advice, this is just something that didn't work for me, was like taking that stuff home and talking about it with Mel. It was like, that was like not a good idea. It's like if things were like, then it's just sort of like shifting the weight onto your family as well, getting them to worry about it. So I learned not to do that. But you need to have somebody who you can talk about it with. And sometimes it's not your investors and it's not your board, because like if you're struggling with some of the really chunky stuff, they say they want to hear this stuff, but they don't. They really don't. And sometimes they shouldn't. You just need to have some people in your life that you can offload, share all that stuff with, and just from psychological baggage thing, it's just like shifting it off of you. It's like lying on a couch and talking to somebody is huge. It's because like nobody's going to have the answers. you've got to find the answers yourself.
Yeah.
And I have so many founders and entrepreneurs come to me asking, for solutions for really gnarly problems, and I'm like, I'm not a smart guy. Like, you're the smartest person in this room right now because it's your thing. It's like you think about this thing probably 18 hours a day. It's like you will find the answer, but whatever you need, if you just need somebody to be a sounding board or just like throw it out on the table and just get it off your chest, then I can be that person. But I'm probably not going to have the answer for you.
And so what do you think it is about successful founders then? Do you think it's just the tenacity to push through that comfort zone that makes them great?
Well, Zoe tells me it's just my innate stubbornness. It's just refuse to let things go. It's like, no, I'm just going to keep fucking doing it until it fucking works.
Zoe's your wife?
Yeah, my current partner. Yeah.
And so you're just ignorance to just push through.
She's like, you're so fucking belligerent. You should just let some stuff go. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And in fact, the more people who tell me no, that you can't do something, the more I will fuck you, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So, have you seen Michael Jordan's acceptance speech for the Hall of Fame?
No.
And so he spends an hour saying fuck you to everyone that doubted him. It's one of the greatest speeches I've ever seen in my life. He's like, he remembered everything that happened throughout his career, and he was like, and Jerry Wright, I just want to say fuck you. I did. Yeah. I'm not saying that everyone should do that, but
but I'm kind of like that. Like, I have a few people in my head who I go to, and it's like who said to my face, "You're going to fail. You're not going to be able to. You're not going to do it." And I'm
how do people do that? Like, what the fuck, right? Yeah. I don't get it. I'm like, it's so far removed from anything in my vernacular to be able to say you're going to fail. But,
well, they didn't use those words.
So they overprotective of you, or just petty?
They were probably coming from a good place, which is like, dude, you're just going to end up in a heap, or you're just going to crash and burn and da 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 da. So they tried to talk you out of it.
Yeah.
And but in a way that was kind of, they're basically telling you, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
And don't bother trying.
Yeah. When did you know Vend was a success? When did you personally know that it was a success?
When the check cleared and when we sold it.
What was that moment like?
It was great. I
imagine, because there's a lot of work that goes into an acquisition, right? Like a lot of work.
Massive, huge amount of work. And I was mainly a passenger on that whole process, because we just brought in people who were good at that stuff. Again, it's like we just get the people who've done this before, know what they're doing, and get them to run a process.
And was that because, was it a time that you were just ready to sell? Is that how it came about?
Yeah, I was, it was funny, a couple of weeks ago, Zoe and I, every year, about this time of year, we get a blank bit of paper and we sort of draw our plan for the year and the things that, we want to do differently in our lives. And so we didn't do one last year for some reason, but we found the ones we couldn't find them, but we found the ones from a couple of years ago. And the thing that stood out was every single time I put on, it's like, this is my last year. I'm not. It's at Vend, at Vend. I'm not going to do it another year.
Yeah.
So I either need to get somebody to, take so I can be free finally.
Yeah.
Never actually wrote going to sell the company. It was always just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I can't go another year. But somehow I would always go another year. So, but looking back, I was just so burnt out. I was so done. You could stick a fork in me, man. I was done.
Well, that's the best thing about being an entrepreneur, right? You can choose the 80 hours a week that you're going to want to work, right?
Exactly.
And so,
the glamour of being a startup founder, You get to choose the 80 hours you want to work.
Well, so can you talk about the process? Or did they approach?
They approached us a couple of times over the years, and it was always a firm no.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're going to make this thing $1 billion business, and they were our biggest competitor, so we took great pride in telling them to, Then they came back to us, and I just jumped on a plane and went to Montreal and said, okay, let's talk about it. If you're serious, let's talk about how this would work.
Yeah.
And that was pre-COVID. That was literally 2 weeks before COVID. I was in New York. Zoe and I both got sick from COVID in New York. This is before the body bags were in the streets.
Wow.
But went to Montreal, and they said, Zoe was sick in the hotel. She couldn't leave the hotel. She was so sick. And they were like, yeah, okay, let's talk about this. And so went back home, and then said to the board, I think they're serious. They're serious. They're not fucking us around. And so we started the conversation, and then COVID happened, and we were all like, okay, well, this is not happening right now because we've got bigger problems to deal with. But then, whatever it was, 6 months later, in the middle of COVID, when the world suddenly realized that having a cloud-based retail platform that could sell online and in store was actually a great idea, it was like crazy. It was like the whole industry suddenly woke up to what I've been preaching for like the last 12 years, saying, shit, we want this.
Yeah.
And then the phone started ringing, and we had, I can't remember, it was like 4 or 5 serious big name internet companies come to us saying, we're quite keen to do look at a strategic partnership.
Yeah.
And then
I love that word, strategic partnership.
It's code, and then eventually they're like, oh yeah, we'd like to talk about acquiring you. And then it became a bit of a joke, and then every time we'd get a phone call, they'd say the word strategic partnership, we'd say, you mean you want to acquire us?
Yeah.
And they were, yeah. And it became a bit of a joke because, literally a month later, there'd be another phone call and it'd be somebody else. And we said no. And then we started to entertain a few offers, but then Lightspeed, I remember the call, they said, okay, well, I think I know the number. And they came back to us and they came up with the number, $500 million. And we were like, yep, that would probably do it.
$500 million. So go back to a conversation with your mum, right, when you're starting Vend and you're telling her about this point of sale software company that you're going to build. What would you say to your mum if she was here right now? And you were saying, how would you go about saying that we're now selling for $500 million, mum? And I'm sure you probably did have that conversation with her, somehow. But that, fuck, man, $500 million, from starting in the GSC to that's remarkable. That would have been...
Considering it was only going to be $100 million internet company, that was the goal. So overachieved on that. Everything I've always done in my life has always been because of my mum, right back to, since she brought that computer home. Because it just put me and my brothers on a pathway through software and IT.
Yeah.
I felt like I'd had a few attempts at making it really big to show her what the possibilities were. Yeah. And then Vend was going to be the one. And then the year that I launched Vend, Mum passed away. And so I felt that she didn't get to see, she was always super proud of me and everything I was doing. But how cool would it have been to have been able to exit the company? And
I'm sure she knows, right? I'm not spiritual or religious. I don't know. I'm whatever I am, but it's I'm sure she knows.
Yeah, same. And so so that was such an amazing feeling. I delivered on my promise to Mum. That she had taken that huge gamble, 40 years ago, whatever it was. And it sort of paid off literally, from a dollar sign point of view. But, I've reflected on a lot, and it's actually the dollars weren't really the important thing. It was I did something that I was proud of. And
then you set up the Pam Fergusson Trust, right? And so she lives on through this trust, which I think is really cool, by the way.
I set up the Pam Fergusson Charitable Trust at about year 4 of Vend. It was so this was 3 years after she passed away. And so I really wanted to keep her name going, attached to something. And so we started the Pam Fergusson Charitable Trust. For at the time, I was coming at it from a naive and slightly selfish point of view, which was we just having trouble getting diversity of candidates. Yeah. And, it was all looking very pale and male. Yeah. And so, I thought the answer would be easy. It's we'll just go and inspire the teenagers of today into computer science, and then in 5-10 years' time, then we'll be employing them. Yeah. And so that's where the charity started. We wanted to prove to kids that they could all be, kind of find the SC3000 equivalent of today, and whether it's 3D printers or robots or AI or whatever it is.
And so was it OMG Tech?
That was our first program, which was literally teaching kids how to code, how to do design, how to innovate, how to do science, and show them how much fun it was. And, put them in front of a robot and say, you're going to program this. You're going to tell this robot what to do.
Yeah.
And most kids would be like, what? I can't do that. It's like,
yeah,
you are. And it's actually not that hard. And showed them how to write basic code. And they were programming robots. And so those programs were an amazing success. We put tens of thousands of kids through those programs. And we always did it 50-50. So every ticket, we always made sure that was equal boys and girls.
Yeah.
And every ticket of a kid who paid to come would sponsor another kid who couldn't afford to come on the program. And so it was a huge success, but it made us realize that inspiring kids and proving to kids that they could do it was kind of step one. It's like then we were actually kind of doing a disservice to the kids, because then they'd go home and they'd go, Mum, Dad, it's like, I learned how to program a robot. I want to grow up and be a roboticist. And then what's the pathway for that kid? Who they don't even have a computer at home. So what's the pathway for that kid, let alone a robot? So how are they going to run that gauntlet?
Yeah.
And so then we realized that the education system is not really geared up to help kids who want to follow design, innovation, and computer science. And we've spent the last 9 years trying to solve that problem. It's like, well, how do we get as many kids on that pathway into innovation that they can, in 10 years' time, become the innovators of tomorrow? They can be solving the world's problems.
And so what are you doing now? What have you been doing over the last 9 years for that? Obviously, there's some, there's a we bought a Zoom moment that we probably need to talk about. Talk us through that alone. So the innovation of awesome, is it?
Yeah. So that's kind of that's at the end. So maybe we'll rewind a bit. So we worked with a lot of communities, and we first of all tried to go out and find communities that we could work with. It was like, we're going to teach you how to do programming and computer science and design. And but what we realized is that the communities needed to come to us and trust us, that they needed to want to basically have these pathways on offer for their young folks. So we spent a number of years basically building up trust within communities, so that they would then invite us in, and we'd design programs for those communities. They work really well, and we're still working with a lot of those communities, but we couldn't scale that up too big. And so and then that got us to think, well, how can we really scale this up? And then we realized that we needed to get this into the curriculum at school. So the classroom is where every kid is every day. So if we can get teachers in schools feeling confident about this stuff and change the way kids learn in the classroom, and that they can do project-based learning and do all the innovation and
have it consistently, so it's not just a one-off
It's just
thing.
not just like a one-day program or a one-week program. It's like it's in the knitting. It's in the fabric of how they do things and how they learn. And that's what we've been working on mostly for the last few years. We're now an accredited provider of professional development for teachers, and so we go into schools and we design programs of how we're going to teach the teachers to teach this stuff in the classroom and build projects that the kids can work on that are relevant to the kids. So you can teach a kid how to program, but if they don't know the relevance of it, of how it's going to change their world, they're not really that into it.
Yeah.
But as soon as you can say, well, imagine, what are the problems that you've got at home or in your community, and then teach them how they can solve those problems using a bit of innovation in science and technology, then they're like, whoa, I can do that? So yeah, man, you can be an inventor. You can solve these problems. And so that's kind of where we're evolving now. And then a few years ago, we were, again, just by dumb luck, had the opportunity to buy an old school camp down in Raglan. Beautiful camp on 100 acres of bush, been there 50 years, and but hasn't been a school camp for a while. And so
Did you ever go there as a school camp? Is that how you knew it or not?
No, I didn't even know it existed. We were looking for a little bit of land in Raglan that we could put a caravan on. So we got a lot of land.
Next minute,
we got some caravans on there. And it's this amazing school camp, and we've slowly been rehabilitating it and getting it ready for schools.
So what's the vision for that then, so that teachers can come and learn how to better educate children in the future.
Yeah, a venue that we can take kids out of their day-to-day lived context. So a lot of the kids who come on our camp, don't even leave the suburb. Like, they've never even been in the bush. They've never been, over the Bombays out of Auckland. And so part of that is that it's like just getting them out into the amazing environment that we should all enjoy. But the other part is really about getting them to solve a problem and showing them that they can actually use science and technology. So the context that we come at it through is one of environmentalism. It's like, well, isn't this cool? Like, this bush is amazing. Like, you love it, and we all love it, and we all cherish it. But there are some problems, like the birds are disappearing. The water's not safe to drink. It's like growing food is, to feed our families is a problem. It's like, how would we solve those problems? And so then we take the kids through a program where they become the architects of some solutions. So they figure out, well, where the bird's going. And it's like, well, it's pests. Pests are getting to the chicks and the eggs. It's like, how do we get rid of the pests? And, we show them how they can solve the problems using innovation and a bit of cardboard and some 3D design and some 3D printers and some laser cutters and whatever they need to solve their problem. And we show them how to do it, and they solve the problems.
It's like a little boot camp for entrepreneurs of the future, right? So you've got a quote here, like, innovation is the fastest way to transform our economy. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a lot of talk about, how we need to shift from agriculture and like doing all the stuff that we've sort of historically done, like do less of tourism, or maybe not less, but like we need to be doing other stuff. Yeah. And a lot of talk about how we need, wouldn't it be great if we had 10 more Zeros or Vends or whomever's. And it's like, that all makes sense. But the real opportunity is if we could empower every single kid to become, if they choose to follow that pathway through to innovation and that they could become the innovators of tomorrow, you just imagine the things that they could dream up and having like another 10 Zeros. We could literally have 1,000 new, they don't have to be that big. They could be like just successful things that solve problems and that make our communities better. Yeah. And then that lifts everybody. Like, instead of, like, if we had 10 more Zeros, then what's that? That's another 10,000 engineers that are sort of roaming around. Yeah. What about the other, like, 190,000 kids who have graduated with a bit of programming, and want to be an engineer? It's like, we're not going to have enough jobs for everybody who wants to get into tech. So, if that's the model of a big corporate tech companies, it's like, what if we had 10,000 small companies run by innovators who just sort of did what we did at Vend and at Vianet and like just sort of pulled stuff together, made it work, had a team of 10 people who were super passionate about what they did, and they make it work, and they solve a problem. They don't have to scale it up to become $1 billion thing.
And I think we're solving the tall poppy issue there, right? Because everyone starts understanding and appreciating the opportunity of trying to build something.
And the communities are involved, because like we're solving problems for our own communities. Yeah.
But you're a weirdo, right? Like, you're a self-proclaimed weirdo, right? And
absolutely.
So, I mean that in the nicest way possible. How do you get other people to buy into your weirdness of just being different and doing what you want? Like, how do you teach kids to do that?
Well, kids, you don't need to teach them how to do that. Every kid is a weirdo. Like, they haven't unlearned how to be weird. Like,
where does it break down? Where do we put a mask on every day and
as soon as you get your first job and you're having to turn up, with the corporate version of you, it's like, turning up to be the professional you. Yeah. That's where I see the sort of like the light dimming in kids' eyes is when they start entering the workforce and they realize that they can't be them. They have to be something different, or the job isn't really what they want to do. Like, it's not their passion. It's not their burning passion. Yeah. But imagine if it was. Imagine if we just had 100,000 really passionate young folk who are like just hell-bent on solving problems. Like, this might all be totally unrealistic, but why not? Why couldn't that be the way it works?
Well, I know a wise man that once said that an impossible is only an impossible, until you know what you're doing, and then it becomes the norm. And so I think I just really misquoted you there, but
I don't know what I said anyway.
Something like that. Yeah. So how can government help us? This is topical for me. I put a call out on LinkedIn today, and said, I really want to talk to someone in government because I want to see some more support between government and the startup ecosystem, and maybe not even support, just communication, or maybe understanding about like how the procurement process can be better for small business and startups that have really cool software that should be selling to government, but having to sell all around the world, and how government can talk and enable startups better. And this is probably like a pertinent thing. How does the education and how does the government industry enable these little entrepreneurs of the future? Like, what can we do?
Well, I mean, that's a gnarly problem to solve, but and the long answer is longer than what we've got to talk about. But the bit I'm focusing on, because like my thesis has been like, if we take a 10-year-old and follow them through the next 10 years, how would they become a 20-year-old and be an innovator?
Yeah.
And like, so we've been doing this for 9 years. So in theory, next year I should have the answer.
Yeah.
But
this is like your Dunedin study.
Yeah, and it's like we literally haven't been following a bunch of kids through over the last 9 years, but we've been looking at what's the next roadblock for them. So it's sort of like, hypothetically, these kids are now 19, and so what are the problems that they're facing right now? And the problem is that they've learned a whole bunch of stuff. They're probably self-taught. They haven't gone to university necessarily. They're just like, they're a really cool designer. They're a 3D artist. They're a coder, whatever. Or they're a combination of, they're a science nerd, whatever. One of the biggest hurdles is getting their first break. It's like, how are they actually going to prove to the world and get the opportunity for somebody to go, okay, let's show us what you got.
So do you think there should be, like I talked about this on a previous podcast, so Jessica Halley, she's doing her PhD on anthropology in startups and trying to understand, like, looking back and how do we build social good, and, looking at the gig economy. And so she was quite passionate about a UBI for people that are in startups and kids and the likes.
That's a cool idea.
Yeah, and so that was something that got me thinking. And it's like, to be honest, I've been reading late at night on it a lot because I started thinking about, well, if we gave kids the safety net to be able to say, go off and build something, you'll have a basic like UBI for these people at least, right? Go off and try. Then for a lot of people in like underprivileged communities, that's huge for them to be able to have a safety net to try.
Yeah.
What else could we be doing, do you think?
So that's a great start. So take how do I put food on the table?
Yeah.
Get rid of that problem. And so UBI or whatever you want to call it, just the living wage for them to not have to worry about that when they get up in the morning. And then need to have a number of programs around them so that they can hang out with people who are in the industry doing the thing that they do. Like they still need to, like, the reality is that they've got some skills and they've got some passion, but they're still very green. And so they need to kind of learn the things that you don't learn from a YouTube video or however they've learned. It's really hanging out with a bunch of people who have been doing it for a lot longer.
Is there still social pressure of people being perceived nerds in like young kids today, or have the nerds taken over now?
I think, sure there is, but it's less. I think that's something that's changing in our culture, is that we can celebrate people who are a bit different. Yeah. And like being a scientist is actually pretty cool. Like being a computer programmer or a 3D designer or a game developer is actually pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, to make something out of nothing, right? Like fucking give props to anyone that does that, whether it be fashion design, whether it be programming, anything that you can conceptualize. Fuck yes.
And the next wave of innovation, so I've been very fortunate to have ridden the SaaS wave and the internet wave, but the next wave is not internet. It's not like teach some kids some code and they can knock some stuff up in a browser and solve problems. Like a good chunk of those problems have already been solved. Like we're running out of problems. Like there's always going to be problems and we're always going to be able to do things better. But the next wave is things, I think we're going to go back into the hard material space. It's going to be, how do we change how we manufacture clothes? How do we build water quality sensors and grow food and create power? And like, this is all stuff that you need, good basis of science and engineering and hands-on. And obviously coding is going to be a huge part of that, because that's going to be the glue that kind of holds everything together. But the next wave is going to be people like building shit with their hands, literally, and so that solve problems. So how do you do that? It's like you just get people on that path, and in communities, we just need to support the ecosystem instead of throwing stones at the ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, acknowledge that the ecosystem is a thing.
Yeah.
Like, you could grow 10 more zeros, 10 more Vends, and out of that, maybe a dozen people might spin out and do their own thing because they've, they've picked up on the skills that they need, and they've got a bank balance that enables them to do that. But of those dozen, 11 of them will be pale and male, and so we're just going to perpetuate the same problem that we've always had.
Yeah.
We need to come at it from the grassroots. We need to find the young folk who are passionate about solving some of the problems that may not necessarily be solved by software.
Yeah.
And just supporting them.
So that's the cool thing. So like, I've been trying to contribute as much as I can in terms of molding Pacifica Tech, and trying to bring people on the podcast, trying to donate our money at Talent Army and sponsor and do all these things. There's some really fucking cool, innovative ideas coming out of these underprivileged communities now, and like in regional communities, because it's actually solving a problem in their community, like you say, right? And it's real and it's tangible, and it's not the next programmer guy, looking for $1 billion unicorn. It's something that's real and you can feel it. And so there's a lot of, I feel like it's spreading around the country, for people to build and create. But it's a testament to people like you and Zoe and and everyone that are doing this to help do this, because there's two paths you can take, right? Once you sell a company, you can go off and put your jandals on and sit on a beach and enjoy the fruits of your labor, or you can ride the elevator, send the elevator back down. That's that you've ridden up. And so I think that's great what you're doing. Do you think other people can be doing more? Do you think the private sector should be doing as much as it's doing? Should they be doing more? Should they do less? Should government do more?
Well, one thing I hear a lot is, and I might be over exaggerating it for effect, but everybody's like, we want young talent. We want talent. Like, where's the talent? Give us more talent. And then there's a little asterisk on the end of that, which is like, we want talent with 5 years of experience.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how are they going to get the 5 years of experience if nobody's going to hire them? And so the project we're working on, and if I tell you this, you can't tell anybody.
Well, I can promise you that no one listens to the podcast anyway, mate.
No, well, we're still trying to figure it out. It's like, how do you kind of bring back that apprenticeship model, but for innovation?
Yeah.
Like, it's not being an apprentice engineer or electrician or whatever. It's like you being an apprentice innovator. It's like, well, what's your idea? Okay, well, who do you need to learn the skills in order to do that from with? And so we're trying to pull together this agency or program where the agency is like contracted to do real world projects.
Yeah.
Could be for government, could be for private organizations, could be for community groups. And it's like, okay, the community's got this problem. We'll pay you to solve it. But the agency solves the problems by using these projects as real world projects for first time graduates or people who have kind of self-taught. It's like, okay, we're not just going to throw you in the deep end. We're going to pair you up with people who have been doing this for 5-10 years, and you're going to learn from the best people in the industry. But because let's face it, that's how every fucking agency works. It's like you get the graduates to do the 90% of the work,
and you just submit it. You got another one. Yeah, good.
But what if we were transparent about it? It's like, actually, this is how it's going to work. It's like, we're going to give as many young people a go on these projects, but they're going to have mentors who are going to be helping and doing a good chunk of the work as well. But what an amazing learning experience. And at the end of the project, if you want to hire the graduate, you're welcome. It's like, please do. That makes another spot for somebody else to come on the program to learn some skills. Yeah.
Well, fundamentally, as a recruiter, I can wholeheartedly agree with you. Everyone says, we need talent. And I say, well, okay, there's like heaps of people coming out of Dev Academy, or there's this, I don't know, we need 6 years experience. We need a senior because we haven't got the capabilities to train a junior. And so how do we fix that? Like, how do you fix the companies that could be taking on grads, could be taking on, not even grads, right? Could just be taking on fucking cool people that, want to get into a startup? Because that's a lot of the people that I talk to, they're just like, man, how do I get into this startup? I'm like, I just want to do it. I want to be involved in it. And I'm like, wow, I'm a recruiter. It's hard for me to charge for you because you've got no skills or experience in the space. But go and talk to all these companies.
I mean, the problem that we always had at Vend is like, there was such huge desire to bring graduates in, but you needed to pair them up with that mentor who could, whether it's 30% of their time or whatever it was to give to the graduate. Otherwise, you're just getting them sitting them in a room, getting them to do some sort of dumb
project thing.
Yeah. And everybody's kind of busy and has budgets and things like that. But if the graduates were being funded by somebody else, then that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. So I don't know the answer, but the problem is, like, most companies think, well, what about the 30% of the time of our team that are kind of like we're having to give to the graduate? Like, if you can solve that problem, so that doesn't really become a thing.
Yeah.
Like whether that's Callaghan going, okay, well, we'll pay 30% of your wage bill for the people who are, mentoring the graduates.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, right? Like, if we can get some sort of support to have an extra person there, or 50% or 30% of their wage paid, so that we can take on some juniors. Yeah. I've seen some companies doing cool stuff where they have different fancy titles now, where someone's called like a people lead or a people engineer or whatever the titles are. I can't keep up with job titles these days. But that's essentially like they're a really good developer and they're not yet a people leader because they haven't got the skills yet to lead a team, but they have some grads around them that they're just mentoring and growing and supporting. And so, like, I've seen a lot of intermediates mentor like young grads, and that seems to be working really well. Like, it's just, we're not utilising heaps of the time of the seniors. The intermediates are getting some dopamine hit from teaching and feeling good about it, and they're learning how to be better managers, and so we're crafting them for the future as well. And so, but yeah, it's an age-old thing that we're like, I've spoken about this at length with lots of people on the pod. How do we go? Mickey's, if you obviously know Mickey pretty well, he's pretty passionate about hiring grads as, building his Top Gun grad program. And so, I think that, there you go. That's the answer. Is like, you just have to, as an employer, you just have to care enough about it and just, don't want to just pay lip service to it. You need to design your grad program about how you're going to actually do it and give the opportunity to these young folks. So Vend sold for $500 million, right? So $500 million. How many of the people in the first 30 were the asterisk seniors? I know you probably, it's hard to remember, right?
Oh, okay.
Because I don't imagine they were all top of the talent. They were probably, you're taking a punt on people, right? You've got to start up.
Well, I mean, take Nick. Like, definitely my number one, Nick Holdsworth. Yeah. But he's employee number one, but his job was to answer help desk tickets. I was like, dude, that's all we need done right now. It's like it's overflowing. Can you do help desk tickets? He wanted to do marketing. And I was like, we'll come back to that. It's the burning bridge at the moment is the help desk tickets. And and Matt, sort of that was his path in as well, and like we didn't even have titles, so like I think JC was the first person who had a title in sales, chief revenue officer.
Gotta rep the part.
And but we just didn't do titles. And I would answer help desk tickets, everybody would answer help desk tickets. The team was pretty young. There were, I don't know exactly whether, what proportion it was like the first job for a lot of folks. But it was pretty close to being the first, well, I'd like to think their real job, in a tech startup.
Yeah. And to say it's the collective of people coming together and the knowledge sharing that helped you to drive Vend going forward. Yeah. And so that's like, and if I look at all the success stories of all companies, right, we can go back and analyze everything and the likes. But I always say this to people, like, when people tell me, I haven't got the time to hire a grad, or I haven't got this, or like we just need seniors at all the times. And I'm saying, have a look back at every single success story of every startup that you've ever seen and think about what their first ever team was, their first 10 to 30 people. And I can guarantee you, they probably had a couple of people in there who were pretty smart engineers or whatever it was, but majority of the team, I imagine, had zero skills and were just faking it, trying to figure out what the fuck to do every day, right?
I mean, I know I was. But yeah. And passion is everything, really. I used to say, if people were like running from the car park into the building every day because they were so excited just to sit down and sort of start solving problems or doing whatever was needed to do, then you've got the balance right. And then because like you'll learn stuff, you'll learn so much
Yeah.
It's like nobody knew how to build Vend,
Yeah.
but we all figured it out, and we all learnt so much as we went.
And it was a fun ride for a lot of people, myself included. You know, I was there for a year and had a fantastic. And I often tell people, like, I often talk to vendors that are like chasing that dragon of that first job that they had with Vend, and they've had a few jobs since, and they're always like, oh, it's never been the same.
I know we've kind of ruined a few people.
Yeah, but it was good. It was a good group of people, and not to get all fatalistic on you, right? But for those that don't know you and follow you on social, you just recently had heart surgery,
yeah.
right? And so, you know, like, when you're sitting there and getting heart surgery, I'm assuming I would do this, and I'm not sure if you did, but I would start thinking about my life, and I would think about everything that's happened to me, and I would think about some cool things that have happened, you know. And so when you thought back, or when you think back over your life, what are the things that really mean the most to you? Like, what are the things that you're most proud of?
It's a Vend, yeah, my kids, and having them in on the journey as well. If you'd asked me 10 years ago, would I see myself in a room full of teenagers in front of a classroom of 30 kids, teaching them stuff, I would have said that would terrify me. Like, the thought of it would terrify me. But now, honestly, it's the most funnest thing.
Was that Zoe? Did Zoe help with that, or is that something that you always wanted to do?
Well, I mean, Zoe has always been the brains and the power behind it. I'm just the idiot who comes up with stupid ideas, and then I somehow convince other people to go and make them reality. Yeah. And so Zoe's been the driving force behind the charity. Yeah. And if it had just been me, it wouldn't have turned into what it is. It would be a sad version of it. But she literally threw me in front of kids, day in, day out, and it's just the most fun. Like, honestly, they still believe that anything is possible. Which is, obviously my jam, is like, because I'm totally there with them on that. And they just, like, everything's so full of laughter and positivity, and everybody's so supportive. It's everything I wished the New Zealand tech ecosystem was. It's like, why can't we just act like a bunch of 12-year-olds? Instead, we act like the fucking surly teenagers who just, like, in the cool group who just want to, like, shit on everybody else. It's like, some people just haven't grown up in the wrong way. It's like we've left the joy behind, and we've kept all the surliness.
It's like the High Tech Awards for me last year was no one walking around in jandals. I mean, you wore a cape and a cane, and I was like, fuck yeah. But like, the High Tech Awards, I've always, people in jandals walking around, and just people, everyone themselves, they're tech, right? They're not these idols that they are now. And now it's like, fuck, like, everyone has to be on at all times, full. They were seeing stylists before and hair and makeup done to go to these awards, and so it definitely feels a lot more proper these days than it ever has.
Yeah, I mean, the High Tech Awards is it's kind of fun for it to be the Oscars of the industry, but like, as soon as we start taking ourselves that seriously, then come on, it's like, it's not the fucking Oscars. It's like, but like, most of the people who were up on stage collecting the glass, the following Monday they were back in jandals. Yeah.
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, I know a lot of those people, but we are definitely changing it as an industry, right? Like,
we're sort of maturing and growing up, and blah 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 blah, all that. But I think we'll probably go back the other way, and like I say, we're going to start going back to, like, solving hard problems with our hands again, and that's literally people who are in the dirt.
So it's not Web3, it's not data, like artificial intelligence, it's products, physical infrastructure that you think will be the next big thing?
Well, all that software, AI, it will just become tools that help us. Like, if the world becomes purely virtual and we're only solving stuff to create a new cryptocurrency or make a website go faster, then we've focused on all the wrong fucking problems. Like, the world has so many other problems that we're just not getting any attention, because they're just, like, super hard problems. Like, science problems are fucking hard problems.
And it's easier to make money than ever before, right? Like, so many crypto bros and all these things making...
It's easier to write a bit of code and, and create a thing. And, and I can't bag it, because, like, it's been my whole career. That's what I've done. That's why I work purely in a software space. But the next wave is going to be doing hard stuff with our hands again. Yeah. And so, like, the stuff about all the freak out about AI and stuff, it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, well, we're still going to have robots who can like do everything else that we do, and we're still a long way. Have you tried self-driving your Tesla? It's like it's still we're still not there yet.
Yeah,
and we won't be for another 10, 20, 30, who knows.
Yeah.
It's like, in the meantime, we've got some real world problems that we need to solve. It's like, I don't care if your car drives itself. It's like, we need to like figure out how we're going to power the planet. We need to figure out how we're going to put good food in front of people. We need to figure out how we're going to keep the planet that we've got, full stop.
Yeah.
You know, it just sounds all very sort of green, but it's like these are going to become the next massive commercial problems that we need solved.
I agree. I think, like, for me, 100% agree with you, 100% on the bus. And I think what we're starting to see now, people are actually realising that the environment isn't getting any better. And they get a look at what's happening recently in New Zealand to realise infrastructure, is pretty fucked. We've got to solve lots of physical products, for problems that we've got. And I think the environmental issues that we've got going forward, we need to focus our efforts on fixing these. There's lots of things that we need to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's easy said and done from a podcast though, right? Like, I think we can reflect back on our careers, and you can reflect back as a successful, founder of a SaaS company and say, this is where I want to put my time and effort now. And you can say these things online, and you can write a blog, but you're doing it, which is great. I think what you and Zoe are doing, is fantastic. That sort of leads me to the last question that I sort of ask everyone on the podcast, is what makes you happy now?
Oh man, that is such a hard question, because I've been trying to figure this out, because my whole life, ever since I was 10 or whatever, when I first had the idea, it's like, I'm going to build a software company and it's going to be amazing and it's going to be awesome. After selling Vend, it's like, I've been so depressed. It's like,
I can imagine.
I spoke to a Olympic gold medalist, and she said the same thing. She was like, yeah, once you've that's been your dream your whole life and you achieve it, and then you realize, well, I can't do that anymore. Like, maybe I could do it again, but whether I would want to do it again, I don't know. But like, you've achieved your dream, and then suddenly it's gone, and you sort of leaves a big empty hole. So I'm trying to figure it out. But the answer really is kids. Like, actually, it's been like, the reason I'm here in Wellington is because Holly, our eldest, is going to Vic. So I've been settling her into the university hall. So it's the first of our kids who have left the nest. And
has that time been good? Like the time that you've got back with your kids in the last 7 years?
It's been so great. Like the last 2 years, not that I've become a full-time dad, but it made me realize how much I was absent in all the other years.
Yeah.
And I'm just super grateful that like our kids are sort of between the ages of 16 and 18, and they're all in that zone where this is one of the times that they really are finding their independence.
Yeah.
But they do about it half-assed and all the wrong fucking ways, like we did. They fall off the rails. You can see what
it's O week this week, right?
So it's going to be a big week for falling off the rails. And you can see them running towards the cliff, and you can say, no, don't do that. But they're going to do it.
Yeah.
And so I'm just been super grateful that I could be passively there.
Well, you get 2 years before where you can really help try and put them on the right path, and then you've got to let go, right? You've got to let go and just say, come to me if you need help.
It's a bit like growing a startup. And see if I can make this analogy work. I don't know. At some point you just let go, and it's got to be its own thing. And so our kids are all sort of becoming their own thing, and it's scary. But I don't know how people do it who have like working 80 hours a week, and then suddenly one of their kids does something really stupid, and they've got to drop everything and solve that problem. I've just been super grateful I could like take a deep breath and go, okay, let's find a pathway forward of like how we're going to get through this and not go off the rails. I'm just realizing that my kids will probably listen to this podcast, and it's like, I'm on to you. But that's what brings me joy, is spending time with our family and sort of undoing all the stuff. Like, terrible advice to give after the fact, but I did so many things wrong being a startup founder. Not literally like the day-to-day of doing the startup, but just like got the balance wrong. Like wasn't there for my family when I needed to be there.
Yeah.
You know, lost contact with friends. Didn't take care of my physical health. You know, having heart surgery probably puts things into perspective a little bit, makes you think about that sort of stuff. But like, this is the other thing that we need to get right in the balance of, especially how we tell the stories about startup.
Is tell them honestly.
Tell them honestly. It's like, it's not all glamour and all crash and burn. It's like there's this horrible zone in the middle, which is just like not crashing and burning, not hitting it out of the park, but it's where you're day to day making these little sacrifices which don't seem like a big thing at the time, but they all add up. Whether it's your health, your friends, your family, or you know, whatever it is. Mental health is a huge part. Like, it's literally taken me 2 years to build back the right brain chemistry. Like, I didn't know it at the time, but like, I obviously did, because, you know, all those years I wrote on the bit of the paper, which was like, I'm not going to do it another year, because I knew I was totally exhausted.
And that's why, for me, like, be supportive of people, of entrepreneurs, you know, give them, like, let them be authentically themselves, let them be vulnerable, and let them have hard conversations, and don't shoot them fucking down if they say things aren't going so well, because we're all just humans trying to do the best that we can.
And we all have other lives. Like, who knows what else is going on? Like, there might be a marriage that's not going so great, or a kid that's sick, or, you know, you don't know. It's like, your startup is not everything. And it feels like it. And if you're an investor, it feels like it. It feels like, man, this person could lose all my cash. Like, it could just be gone tomorrow. It's like, well, that was the deal when you invested. Like, if that's freaking you out right now, then you shouldn't have invested right from day one when it sounded like a great idea. It's like, you should invest knowing that it could go horribly south. And then don't punish the entrepreneur for failing.
Yeah. Well, that's the hard one thing. The money is the biggest thing, and it's like the pressures that come with the money and the likes. But all right, mate. Well, hey, so this has been fantastic. I could chat over 3 more whiskies here. But I noticed you didn't bring a bike, so I'm not expecting for you to pull out a little 3-page. Hey, Troy, I don't
have the next idea yet.
Yeah.
Although I'm still thinking about getting this agency off the ground. So
yeah, I think that's a good idea. That sounds fun, and I think. It sounds like you've probably gone through that period of mourning and releasing, you know, that you can start to be a little bit creative again. Because, I can't imagine, like, I've been doing this for 7 years since I left Vend, you know, and I have that period, you know, where I'm just like, I can't do this another day sometimes. And then I get back up and I'm fine, and I do stupid shit. Like, I'll do a podcast because that'll give me a couple of days a week where I can just talk to interesting people. But yeah, I have so much empathy for people that have done this. And I think I had an opportunity to get acquired last year from a big tech company, a name that everyone will know. And I said no. And then I thought, if I did that, what the fuck would I do? You know, like, how would I do it? And if I did so, I'd probably need 4 years off just to recharge, because I'm so fucked, you know. And so it's hard doing what, you know, entrepreneurs do. I think you are one of the big names, one of the big voices in the industry. And so for you to come on and chat openly, authentically, and honestly, mate, I think it's fantastic, and thanks so much.
Yeah, hopefully I haven't said too many stupid things.
Yeah, well, we can edit it out.
You just edit all the stupid things out. That'd be great.
Yeah. Well, they're listening to this now. They're at the end, so we've edited it all out. And on that note, thanks so much, and I'll let you get back on your bike, Vaughan.
Thank you.
Wow, if you're still with us now, that was one of the longest podcasts we've done, and the reason why we just kept shooting was because I loved that conversation with Vaughan. He was honest, he was vulnerable, he was born, you know. And I think anyone that wants to found a company, or is a founder right now, or wants to work in a startup, or is even working in a startup, should listen to that podcast and just know that we're all the same. We're all got the same challenges. There's highs and lows. Just be authentically yourself, be honest, and, you know, do impossible things. And so thanks so much for watching. Thanks for all our viewers. Thanks for all our subscribers. Please share it around. This podcast, I hope, is going to be really, you know, great for the industry. Thanks so much.
This podcast is produced by John O'Tucker from Empire Films.